I'm going to show you how to turn a high neckline into a sexy V neckline and finish it off with a facing. So that means we're going to have to create a facing for it. And this technique will work on any dress or shirt or blouse, anything with a neckline. And if you've got a zipper at center back that goes all the way up to your neck, I'm going to show you how to work around that. The first thing we're going to do is chalk out the neckline. So you can do this on yourself in the mirror. I've put mine on a dress form so it's easy for you to see, and I've got my chalk. Now this dress I have is vintage and there are moth holes all over it, so I want to make sure I'm creating a V below this center moth hole. Now we're going to chalk out the neckline. So I know I want to come to this spot right here, so I'm going to put a little spot there. And now I'm going to rough chalk this out. We'll go back with the rulers and make sure it's perfect. And I know that I want to come out about 1 inch from the neck, so I'm going to put a mark here. And then I'm going to blend the shape that I think I want down to that point. So I'm kind of doing a scooped V, you could do a straight V. Your V shape is all up to you and your style. So I'm gonna chalk out the other side as well, just so I can see it visually, but we are gonna go back with the rulers and make sure that it's symmetrical. There we go. So take a look at yourself in the mirror, and do you like that neckline? Do you wanna change it? It's just chalk, so you can totally make it deeper or bring it up. I'm liking this neckline right here, so I'm gonna leave it right where it's at. And now we're gonna do the back. So now I'm gonna continue at that mark on the shoulder and bring it down a bit in the back. So I'm really liking how that is looking. Again, we can draw it on the other side as well. So we're just going to connect these two. There we go. So I'm loving the distance in the back. We just drop this a little bit. And then if we turn it around to the front, you can see we have our new neckline here. Now that we have the neckline chalked out, we've got a few other steps to make this nice and professional looking. Now that we have the dress off of the dress form, we need to make sure that the V that I drew is balanced and symmetrical. The first thing I'm gonna do is find the center of the front waist. So we've got 14 inches here on the front waist. So I'm gonna go ahead and mark it at 7. Now what I'm gonna do is line up my center point down at the waist with the center point at the neck, which is right where this collar opens. So we are going to draw a line straight down the center of the bodice. So now I know this is the center of the bodice. As you can see, I was off a little bit with my center, so I'm just going to redraw my neckline here with a ruler. First thing I'm gonna do is measure out 1 inch from the neck and put a chalk mark here. And now what I'm gonna do is connect this chalk mark at the shoulder with the center point where I want my V to be down here. So let's just remark at center where we want the point of the V. Now I'm gonna grab my French curve and I am going to redraw my neckline. There we go. So now we have the new neckline on half of the front of the dress. Now that I have my new neckline drawn, I'm going to draw my seam allowance, which is 1/4 of an inch. So I'm gonna use my ruler to draw my seam allowance 1/4 inch out. Here we go. Now this new line I just drew is going to be my cutting line because we need to have seam allowance in order to attach the facing. Now we also have to make sure that the back is symmetrical, but we've got a seam here, so I'm just gonna do one side of it. So this line is looking good where I drew it, but I have to extend the seam allowance. So we're drawing the seam allowance towards the inside. Okay, so now that there will be my cutting line. So now that we have one side perfected, we are gonna cut on our cutting line and then fold it over and use it as a template on the other side to make sure it turns out symmetrical. You might be wondering, what are we gonna do with this zipper here? It is going to interfere. Well, make sure you zip it down and then we can actually just cut right through it. Don't forget to make sure you're cutting on that extended seam allowance line that you just drew in. Use the back of your scissors when you're cutting through the zipper and make sure it's a nylon or a plastic zipper. I have a bunch of layers here, so I'm just cutting through them, and now I'm going to turn it over to the front. And we're just going to continue following that seam allowance line. So now we're gonna take this piece that we cut and fold it over and line it up and put some pins in it so that way we can use it as a template or a pattern piece to cut the other side. So I have this side pinned down and now I'm gonna use it as a template and just cut along right next to it. Make sure you're just cutting through the top layer and you're not catching the back of your dress in this. Just keep it nice and flat. So when you need to move it or flatten it out, just readjust. And there we go. We have separated them. OMG, what did we just do? We just cut off the entire front of our dress. But don't worry, you're in good hands. We did it. We cut a V in the front of this dress. Now, once you have it at this point, you want to make sure you're not pulling it so that way you don't stretch out the V. Now it's time to create a little pattern piece for our facing. So grab your pinwheel, and if you do not have this tool, it's a great tool to buy, or you can use an awl or a pin. So I'm going to trace out the entire thing with the pinwheel. First, I'm going to follow the front neckline. This isn't going to ruin your fabric. You can go through all the layers of anything that you have. I'm also going to go across the shoulders and the back neck. There we go. Now that we have all the little dots in it, what we need to do is a little bit of pattern drafting. Now we're going to trace out all those little dots with some rulers to true this up. So I'm going to draw on my shoulders. I know it's hard to see this, but there's all these little dots in the paper, and what I'm doing is tracing over these little dots. So if you want to make this symmetrical as well, what you can do is trace out half and fold it. So I'm going to trace it all out, but then I'll do that. If you don't have a French curve, you can also just use a straight ruler and follow all those little dots. Okay, so now we have the front neckline traced out, and I have to do the back neckline. So this here is essentially the new neckline that we've created on our dress. Now what I'm going to do is extend this line 2 inches to the inside. So this is the facing that we are creating. So the facing is that additional fabric piece that gets sewn around the edge of something to finish it. And this is one of the easiest ways to finish a V. There we go. So there is our V shape. Now this already has a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here because we left that on the dress. So we don't have to worry about adding an additional seam allowance around the neckline. Because I traced the sewing line before, I need to add an additional 1/2 inch out here. So that way we have some seam allowance at the shoulders. So I'm just going to add a 1/2 inch onto each shoulder. Now that we have that done, we need to do the back. So in order to do the back, we need to put another piece of paper behind this one. Now we're going to trace out the back neckline and the shoulder where the seam allowance is that we put on. And now when we remove this, we're going to have a bunch of little dots there that are for our back neckline. So what we're going to do is trace them out again with the ruler. Now because we traced the cut line for the shoulder, we can draw in a 1/2 inch for the shoulders. Now we only need to trace out half of this since the back is cut too, but I'm going to draw the whole thing just so you can visually see it. So this would be our back facing. Now what we need to do is find the middle of it. So let's cut it out and fold it in half. And then we're going to have to draw an extension of a 1/2 inch onto center back. So that way we can finish the area where the zipper is. So I've cut half of it out. And now what I'm going to do is fold it in half to make sure the shoulders match. And now where this fold line is, that is going to be our center back. So I'm going to pencil in our center back. And now I'm going to extend this a 1/2 inch so we can finish the zipper. And now our back facing becomes cut too. And now I'm going to cut on the outside of that extension, trim that up a little. And now this is our back facing here. So this here is the shoulder. And this here is center back. So now what I've done is I've cut out half of the front neck facing. Now you can either choose to just cut it straight at center front and do place on fold for the pattern piece, or fold it over and retrace out this shape to make sure it's symmetrical. So you can see mine moved a little bit. This is extra over here. So if I was gonna do a full front neck facing in one piece, I would want to retrace this piece, but I'm just gonna do one piece cut on fold. So that means I can cut right down the center, and then I can mark my pattern piece cut on fold. Now you should have two pattern pieces, one for the front, which is cut on fold, and one that's cut too for the back, because we have a zipper at center back. Now if you didn't have a zipper at center back, this one could also be cut on fold. So now I'm gonna cut out fabric and interfacing for both of these and iron the interfacing on the back of the fabric. So I've cut out the fabric, I've cut out the interfacing, and I fused the interfacing to the fabric, and I finished my edges. Let's take a look. So we have the front facing and the back facing, and I've interfaced the back of it with some white fusible interfacing, and I've also finished my edges with the serger. And notice that I've only finished the outside edge, not the inside edge that we're going to be sewing to the dress. So I've just finished the outside edge and the shoulders and center back. Now if you don't have a serger, you could do a zigzag, you could do an overcast, your choice how you want to finish your edges. Now is the exciting part. We are gonna attach this to the dress. The first thing we're gonna do is sew the shoulder seams. So you're gonna flip your facing pieces right sides together to end up with one facing piece. So I sewed up the seam at a 1/2 inch with a straight stitch, and then I ironed open the seam. Now what we're gonna do is take our facing and place it right sides together around the neckline of the dress. Make sure you're lining up your shoulder seams when you're pinning this, and also make sure your V points are lining up as well. Now what we're gonna do is take our facing and place it right sides together around the neckline of the dress. Make sure you're lining up your shoulder seams when you're pinning this, and also make sure your V points are lining up as well. And if everything went as it was supposed to, these two pieces should line up perfectly. Your facing should match the cut line in your dress. We're going to work our way all the way around the back neckline. Now your back facing should hang off a 1/2 inch at center back because we left that extra extension there. Okay, now we have our facing pinned all the way around the neckline of the dress. So we're going to sew all the way around the neckline with a 1/4 inch seam allowance because we left a 1/4 inch right here when we were pattern drafting. Don't forget to remove your pins when you get to them and backstitch at the beginning and the end. In that zipper, you can just sew right over it. Make sure everything's nice and flat. Make sure your seams are open if you have seams that you're sewing over. For me, I just have the shoulder seam here. When you get to the center of the V, leave your needle in, lift up your foot, and turn your neckline. We're coming up to the zipper on the other side, and you're just gonna sew right over it and backstitch. Now you can see that we have the facing sewn on, right sides together. Now what we want to do is clip into this V here, so that way it turns smoothly. There we go, directly down to the stitch. Now what we want to do is flip the entire facing to the inside of the garment and give it a good iron. After we do that, we are going to take the facing, make sure the seam allowance is towards the facing, and we're going to create a little understitch right here. So that way, the facing stays towards the inside of the garment. Now we're gonna stitch 1/8 of an inch away from the seam, making sure we're stitching on the facing. Next up, we need to attach the facing at the shoulders. Otherwise, this facing is just gonna pop up and we don't want that. So we're gonna fold it down to the inside, and now the seam allowance at the shoulders, we're gonna grab just the seam allowance and we're just going to tack these together on both sides. So I'm just gonna stitch this down, maybe like 1/2 inch, 3/4, an inch, really depends on your project, but we just want those seams to stay together. So we're stitching the facing seam allowance and the dress seam allowance together at the shoulder. And now it's not going to pull apart. We're gonna do the same thing to the other shoulder. So our last step is finishing the back of the facing where the zipper is. Now maybe you don't have a zipper and you are done. If you have a regular zipper, you can go ahead and hand stitch this down. You could machine stitch it down right through the existing stitch on the outside. If you have an invisible zipper, I have a whole separate video on how to put a lining into an invisible zipper dress, and you're gonna wanna check that one out for that. But I'm just gonna hand stitch this down real quick, and then we'll take a look at it and see what our new neckline looks like. We now have a beautiful V neckline. It is nice and smooth and modern looking. Do you remember what that neckline looked before? It was up to our neck with a giant collar on it. It doesn't look like that anymore, and this one is much more stylish. Look at how nice this neckline looks on the front and the back, and it's so nice and smooth because we added that facing to it. So the facing is key to creating a nice smooth V-neck and getting that nice point in there. So I do love upcycling and saving clothes, and you might be wondering, why does this dress have all these holes in it? Well, it's a wool bodice and a moth got to it apparently at some point. So I am going to fix this. I'm going to add some embroideries, I think, to all the little spots on it. I was kind of thinking maybe little bees or a little butterfly or something could be really cute. So if you want to see how that's going to turn out, make sure you follow me on Instagram because I'm going to be posting it in my stories on the Sew Anastasia Instagram. Thanks so much for watching Sew Anastasia today. I hope you had fun making a V-neck and a new outfit, top, shirt, something like that. If you have any questions about it, leave it down below in the comments and I'll get back with you as soon as possible. If you're not a follower to Sew Anastasia, make sure you follow and hit that notification bell so you know when the new videos come out. And if you're already a follower, thank you so much for watching today. If you enjoyed the video today, make sure you give it a thumbs up and let me know what you thought down below in the comments. And don't forget to add me in all your favorite social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all those other ones. I know I'm forgetting a few. So that way we can stay connected and creative together. And I teach sewing classes in my design studio here in Chicago, Illinois. So you can come take a class with me in person. Pretty cool, huh? And if you don't live in Chicago, no worries at all. We are launching a Sew Anastasia Sewing Academy later this spring. So keep an eye out for it. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.